little bit of a funky watch, but there's some connection here in Dallas with fossils.
I was trying to decide whether or not am I going to leave the corporate world to do this.
Yeah.
And
That said, if I ever run into one, I'll probably still buy it, but not necessarily actively doing it. I'm not waiting in line for it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first recording of Time and Tell, a podcast about all things watches, the community around it, and the interesting stories that come with the hobby that we all love. I'm Peter Cho. I'm the designer and product guy here at Jack Mason. And my first guest today is Shane from Relative Time. Welcome, Shane.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. As I had mentioned, this is our first recording. This is something that we're just going to try to do to just see what happens. It's organic, but that's the whole point of
Just have fun.
But yeah, it's the whole point of podcast. So, what are you wearing today? We'll just start there.
Clothes. Not that kind of podcast. No, I have a Zodiac Olympus. I can't see it on the camera. A little bit of a funky watch, but there's some connection here in Dallas with fossil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they just reissued one of those, right? Is that the reissue or is that one of the originals?
This is the newer one. Well, it's slightly newer because it's got this like blue color, like blue jean. And then I think they just put out a slightly larger field watch version.
Oh yeah,
and then I swapped the band on that because it came with like a normal just blue band to give it a little more contrast with it.
Yeah,
two-tone black or brown.
I know. I didn't realize both sides were symmetrical, both sides of the case.
It's a really weird case if nobody's ever seen it. It's one of those watches not a lot of people know about.
Yeah.
And I just happened to see it a while ago and kind of get minorly obsessed with it until I finally bought one.
It kind of looks like a shield.
Yeah, I think they call it a manta ray case.
That makes sense.
Or some people say like Batman logo kind of thing.
That makes sense. Oh, that's nice. What's the movement in that one?
STP 1 whatever.
Yeah, it's their in-house. Yeah.
Sort of in-house.
Yeah.
Whatever Fossil's doing.
You and I had talked briefly before, but yeah, that's the world that I came from. And actually, this was back in 2015, was when I left Fossil to start Jack Mason. In fact, I'm not sure if this is completely accurate, but I remember HR told me that I was the first person to quit in 2015 because it was after the holidays. I was trying to decide whether or not am I going to leave the corporate world to do this.
Yeah.
And then decided, yes, I am.
Yeah.
And then literally I don't know what it was, January 2nd or 3rd came and I was like, all right, putting in my notice. But right around then is when they were building out STP.
Okay.
And I remember my boss at the time, he was working on some branding on STP, and it was just kind of funny because they started showing the STP logo and things like that around the office, just kind of like trying to get feedback. And the amount of people that were like, isn't STP an oil company?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
well, if Shinola can become a watch company, and they were like, what shoe wax?
Yeah, that's which I didn't know about.
Yeah.
Like, it's a shoe wax company that Tom Kartsotis, who actually started Fossil, went in and started Shinola.
Yeah. I think he got bored and went off looking for new adventures.
Yeah, I guess when you grow a multi-billion-dollar company and you're like, I want to go do this now.
Yeah,
you can. But cool watch. But yeah, Zodiac was a watch or a brand that Fossil, in-house that they had, and it was kind of a shame because my design background when I was over there, that was the one brand that never got enough love.
Okay.
It was because at that time the fashion watch industry was just absolutely booming. I mean, Michael Kors was like at its peak. Yeah, I think like a $750 million business. It was absolutely insane. And so Zodiac was just kind of in the background. You remember when they were making those like big chunky geometric watches that were like, oh gosh, I forgot the series of them. They were oversized. They were it was nothing like what you have on your wrist. And then it wasn't until later on they decided, oh, we're gonna dig into our
Bring it back to its core,
archives.
yeah.
Then it was like, oh, this is so nice.
Just the cool thing about the Olympus, sort of cool, was that I think it was originally back like the 50s or the 60s they had it, and it died out. It never made it to the 70s or the 80s, but someone saw it, loved the idea of it, and decided to bring it back.
Yeah. Well, I just saw recently that, because I still have some good friends over there. If I'm not mistaken, I think they just came out with another one just in the last few weeks. It's all gold or something like that. I might be mistaken. But anyway, unique watch.
Yeah, might be the Moonswatch, Moonshine, whatever.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's a good topic to talk about. I just, the reaction from everyone on that. I mean, the disappointment, I guess. Like,
my favorite thing with the whole MoonSwatch thing, I mean, since it started, has been just going to Instagram and checking out swatches, like any post from Swatch, even if it's not MoonSwatch related.
Yeah.
You have so many watch nerds who are just angry and just venting. It's minorly entertaining to look at.
I just love, I mean, this goes with any thing. It doesn't just have to be a watches, but like, especially watches, the comments are just, sometimes I'm just crying laughing from the comments because I can't even recall some of the funny ones, but I mean, all they did was turn the secondhand
and I think
gold,
it's the regular black one, and why gold doesn't even make any sense, especially for the name. I don't get it.
Well, I did read though, for those that like who care about this kind of thing, but they produced them or made them or whatever during the full moon or something like that. Yeah.
Like, what?
I don't know.
Yeah. That said, if I ever run into one, I'll probably still buy it, but not necessarily actively doing it. I'm not waiting in line for it.
Well, funny thing about MoonSwatch, did you know that when we had you guys over, you and Hector and some of the other guys, I think Jay and Josh,
they went to go find one.
They went to North Park.
Yeah.
To go buy, and Corey ended up going with him and bought one.
Oh, really?
He has one of the MoonSwatches. Yeah.
I mean, every once in a while, like if I'm in the area, I kind of stop by. Hey, you got one? No.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. But meanwhile, he just goes out on a Sunday unexpectedly and just picks one up easily.
Yeah, I got a friend too who went on a trip to Germany, I think.
Uh-huh.
And they just sent me a post of one. I'm like, they got one, and I was like, was there a line? Was it hard? Like, oh no, they're like fully stocked or something.
Yeah, I don't
like how. It's a crazy thing.
It really is. I am wearing actually one of our old watches. It's the Miribo. I'm not sure how much you've seen our old watches, but it's a quartz watch, which we primarily do still have. But it's a 40 millimeter race inspired watch. We call it the Miribo. Miribo is actually, there's a specific turn in the Monaco Grand Prix called the Miribo. In fact, I think there's a Hotel Miribo or something like that. But anyway, it was a watch that actually, it was really popular with our customers, I think mainly because of the size, the 40 millimeter size. But for whatever reason, it just never it was like that in between when it came to like our audience, because the enthusiasts wanted something like an automatic, like in this watch. Like, oh, I love the watch, but I wish it was an automatic. Or
that's a very common comment.
Yeah, or like a non-enthusiast, or call kind of mass market.
Yeah,
like, oh, it's not big enough. So it was like this weird in between. But something that we are in the middle of doing. I think we're scaling down all of our watches, kind of like discontinuing a lot of things, mainly because we feel like there are some powerful platforms to build upon, but what we'll do is probably just re-release them later on.
Yeah.
As just maybe tweak the design a little bit, but put a more meaningful movement in there.
Yeah.
Things like that. But for the most part, other than the movement, there isn't anything else. It's still 316L stainless steel. It's still sapphire. It's still,
It's one of those things in the watch community where it doesn't make sense at all sometimes. Yeah. Especially because like a quartz movement's cheap, but it's like an NH35 Seiko automatic isn't much more. Yeah. It's like maybe $10.
Yeah. Oh, the NH35, it's kind of all, relative. Like that is the cheap movement of the automatic.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
and people argue like quartz has no soul. I'm like, that was mass produced too. It's like,
yeah. I mean that's kind of a good like segue. I mean, what kind of where does your journey begin, like with watches?
It's kind of a 2-part journey, sort of. Originally, way back when I was in college, this mid 90s ish. I grew up with like digital watches. I grew up wearing like a Casio Databank, kind of like nerd watches.
Yeah.
And I was getting, what was I, junior, pretty 3rd, 4th year, somewhere around there. Started thinking like, hey, I got to start looking for internships. I got to start applying for jobs. I'm going to be in the real world soon. It's not really professional to be wearing something like that.
Yeah.
Or at the time, my current watch stopped working. It was a pager watch.
Oh,
it was a weird thing. It was actually, I don't know how much that thing cost originally. My mom originally bought it for my dad. My dad's like, he didn't want to be like contacted 24/7. It's like, I don't want this thing. So I took it. And it was cool, at least at high school at the time, because, pagers weren't allowed. Yeah. But it's like nobody knew it was one because I was on a watch.
Yeah.
And they just stopped service of it. So I was looking like, I need a new watch. I should get like a regular 3-handed watch. It looks more professional. And this was right when eBay was really starting to go. Okay. So, and I'm always kind of a tech guy and kind of a deal seeker. So I started looking on eBay and started seeing all these cool watches, especially from Seiko.
Yeah.
And at the time, I think Kinetics were just come out. And as kind of a tech person who always wants the latest and greatest things.
Sure.
Although I've kind of died away from that as I've gotten older. But back then I was like, I want a Seiko Kinetic. And I was looking and the prices were still pretty high for a college student at the time. So said, okay, I settled on a solar pulsar watch just to kind of get used to wearing like a 3-handed watch. Cause I'd kind of not worn one for forever. It's kind of had to retrain myself to read it.
Yeah.
Basically. So I said, use that as kind of an interim watch. And I wore that through the rest of college. And then when I graduated, I bought myself a Kinetic. It was a titanium Seiko and wore that thing to death. I kind of, as I was looking through eBay, I was kind of getting obsessed with watches, but there was no YouTube back then. So you couldn't really, I didn't know where to go or where to learn about any of this stuff. So I wanted to kind of get more, but then sort of life got in the way, so to speak, going from job to job and building a career, going back to grad school and things. And then, I don't know, 6-7 years ago now, I've been doing the YouTube channel for 5 years. Started sort of getting back into it through YouTube. Started watching like Urban Gentry and things like that for a little bit. And then didn't really take the plunge too much until I was on a cruise ship. And of course, I got like an Invicta, kind of ugly looking skeletonized black coated Invicta.
That's such a cruise ship watch.
Yeah, it's just such a cruise ship watch. I fell into the trap of like, this is 80% off, 90% off, whatever. It's usually $1,050, whatever. And it's not till you get back home and start looking on Amazon like, that's cheaper than I bought it for. Yeah. So I kind of got into that. That started it, and that's the one thing about Invicta. Sometimes people hate the brand, but it's like they get a lot of people into it. It's like they start with it, and then they start getting into it, and they like it more and more, and go on. So we started getting more into it that way. Started watching more YouTube channels, and bought a few more things. Like I got a what was it, Citizen ProMaster, it's called the Fugu, which has the crown on the left side. And a few other things. And then after that, it's my watch journey sort of tied into the YouTube channel. It's kind of they're together now because I was still pretty early on back then. And it was a Black Friday sale. I said I'm kind of a deal seeker at times. And there's a website called Slick Deals that I've gone to for like a decade.
Oh, yeah.
And there was somebody posting about like Black Friday deals at Timex. And I was like, oh, okay. And I started looking at what was there. And there was this pretty cool, pretty cheap watch on there that nobody really knew anything about. Had a cream dial, but had this really nice leather band. It was a part of their Waterbury series, which is kind of their slightly nicer stainless steel case. So I got one and I started looking more into it. And it turned out to be a little more interesting than just a regular watch because at the time, Timex had this crossover with Red Wing boots.
Oh, cool.
Not a lot of people know about it. It became like huge in Japan, supposedly.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense because Red Wing is...
Yeah, and I never knew that.
Yeah.
Like why the Japanese obsess about Red Wing boots.
Well, Japanese love like vintage American fashion. So anything like Red Wing, denim.
So I see like Timex, old brand.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. And it was like a black dial with this red Wing boot style band on it. And it turns out this is basically a cream dial version of it. It didn't say Red Wing on it, but it had, I think back said SB Foot Tanning Company, which is the parent company of Red Wing boots.
Oh,
so it's kind of this cool watch nobody really knew about.
Yeah.
And I decided at the time I just happened to got like an action camera. So I never really got into video stuff before that. And since I'm kind of a computer gamer, I bought on sale. It was like a condenser mic, a Blue Yeti mic.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had all the things to start a YouTube channel going. Oh, the action camera didn't really work out. That's part of it. But after that, I kind of wanted to get into learning how to video and audio editing, kind of getting into the whole like background and process. And I figured the best way to learn it is just to jump into project.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this watch nobody really knew about. I was watching YouTube watch channels and I said, hey, let's just start a channel.
Yeah.
And then things just progressed from there. And as the channel's grown, so has my collection of watches, so has my budget for watches. Because I've always kind of, the agreement with my wife has kind of always been like, like my budget for watches is coming out of that.
Yeah.
So to speak. So not to go too crazy with anything.
That's cool. So it actually started, because one of my questions was like, what was, like if there was a specific watch that made you realize like, oh, I really like this. I'm a big watch enthusiast or things like that. And I had no idea that there was an actual watch that started your YouTube channel.
And I still have it. I think I need to change the battery in it, but I still have it.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
That's one I won't really get rid of. It's not really worth much anyways, but yeah, it kind of just started spiraling.
Monetary, but I mean, it's worth so much. I mean, in terms of like, what it represents, which I think is like such, I think that's the coolest thing about watches is that sentimental value.
Yeah.
And we've been doing, I've been doing Jack Mason for about 8 years now.
Yeah.
And I'll have visibility into like the customer service emails and things like that. Aside from the, those who, write in really angry and pissed off about certain things, which happens. There are a lot also, like really great stories.
Okay.
And there were a handful I remember off the top of my head, but one of them was about some guy who he had been laid off. He was going through all sorts of like just struggles that life was throwing at him. And then he had said that he had actually saved just a small amount of money. And he decided to buy one of our watches, like with the little that he had left. And when he received it, he said that it, like when he put it on, it gave him the confidence and like just this energy to go out and find a new job. And sure enough, he got one.
Okay.
And like that story just like hit me like a tidal wave.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, here you have there's one person's like, your watches aren't good enough.
Yeah.
And then another person that like kickstarted his jump started his like exactly.
Yeah.
And that to me, that's like, it's there's all different levels of product out there, but I think at the end of the day, if you're really intentional about what you represent as a brand, the product itself, then it's like, I was at a loss for words, like I am now. Yeah, it was pretty pretty moving to hear something like that.
And that's what I've always said about watches too. Is it's not how much something costs that brings value to you, it's the memories you make with it, or things like I remember one guy left a comment. I don't even remember what watch it was on, but he was talking about how much he loved the watch because he was going through cancer treatment, and it was just something to keep him distracted while he was doing it, and it was just like, oh wow.
Yeah,
it's just those connections, and it's
and they share it. They love. I think that's what's cool is like the community.
Yeah,
they like sharing these stories with each other because you can relate. Because you're just like
Like one of my more favorite watches. I haven't worn it too much lately. Is Seiko Monster Save the Ocean Special Edition one. It's their Antarctica one. And part of the reason I love it is it's got this cool dial that's supposed to look like the surface of Antarctica. So it's all ice, but on the very far left corner, there's these little tiny penguin footprints. It's cool. Weird. It's goofy. But the thing is, I grew up in San Diego, and I grew up like maybe a mile from SeaWorld.
Oh.
So, and I worked at SeaWorld when I was a teenager. My brother worked at SeaWorld for the longest time as a teenager. So like I grew up going to SeaWorld and I always loved the penguin encounter. So it's this goofy thing, but it's like it kind of takes me back to those the younger days and memories and going to SeaWorld, seeing the killer whales and all this other stuff.
Okay. Side note, that is like my favorite animal on the planet.
Killer whales or penguin?
Orcas.
Okay, yeah.
You can't say killer whales.
No. That's not politically correct now.
No, it's I actually grew up part of my childhood was in Sacramento, Northern California. And one of my favorite pastimes was like our entire family. I mean, my cousins, my uncles, like we'd all drive down to go to SeaWorld.
Yeah.
And I was obsessed with just marine animals in general. I mean, I had every little whale, shark figurine you can imagine. I mean, we'd go to like my favorite store was like going to like one of those like nature stores where they had like the Discovery Channel store or something, and they would have like those things. And so going to SeaWorld and watching the shows, like the orca shows and everything was like, okay, this is like the coolest thing ever.
I get it, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
SeaWorld's got a lot of flack these days.
Oh, yeah.
From animal activists and things about how wrong, not to get political side of things, but one of the things I've pointed out is like growing up there, you had just as many kids talking about how they wanted to be a marine biologist as wanted to be astronauts or policemen, firemen. So it was just like, hey.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're really smart creatures.
I mean, that's what they do like in nature.
Yeah.
Like they play with their food, which is like actually that's crazy. That's actually kind of crazy to think about. But
well, that's a weird tangent.
I have yet to see one in real life. Yeah, I mean, I know there's a lot of, I mean, we like our Solar Watch collection, we donate to, it's not ocean, well, kind of, it's ocean conservation, cleaning up the plastic bottles and things like that, work with the foundation. But yeah, I know that's like a huge initiative, especially in the watch industry when it comes to the ocean cleanup and things like that.
It's kind of a big thing. I think like back to the MoonSwatch, I think that's like bioceramic supposedly, where they're using recycled plastics in there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you,
and I think Oris has something where they're using like recycled plastic in a dial or.
Oh, really?
Maybe. I think I remember seeing something about
It certainly made a huge splash in the watch industry when it comes to recycled plastic.
Yeah.
It's really interesting because on one hand, you see it over and over again in watch brands and you're just like, I've seen this, like customers are like, oh man, they're just like following the same trend.
Yeah.
As it's like, you're missing the entire point.
Yeah.
It's not a trend. You're like, in fact, the more people who do it, more companies that do it, the better.
Yeah.
Cause like, so it's just, it's interesting to see that, but it's great. I mean, I think there are a handful of like recycled plastic fabricatos, I guess, out there who have been working, and they do other products too, not just watches. But yeah, so okay, so you were in San Diego.
Yeah,
that's where you grew up.
Originally.
So when did you come to Texas?
Had a couple stops back and forth. My wife's career, we got married and her career took her originally to North Carolina. So moved from San Diego, I think it was probably 2005-ish. Went to North Carolina for 3 years. After that, we kind of had a little bit of enough of North Carolina. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but we just kind of missed some things. So she was finishing like a graduate program there. And the job she got next was just north of Austin. So we went from North Carolina to Austin and then was there for 5, maybe 6 years. And then she's originally from Northern Illinois, like Rockford. Wow. So her mom got sick. So we moved up there to help for a little while. So we're there for 3 years, but then kind of got sick of snow. So we're like, we need to get back to Texas.
Yeah.
Because when we were in Austin, Texas was it was one of the few places that just kind of felt like home for some reason.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because it's like everything sort of intersects here culturally, food wise, just whatever. At least growing up in San Diego, it's kind of like this is a little bit more similar to that. A lot better Mexican food than North Carolina too, as well as better barbecue.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah. So it was up in like Wisconsin, Illinois area for 3 years. And, we moved back to Dallas and been here for last 6.
6 years?
Yeah.
Oh,
so I've been in Texas a while. I mean, counting the time in Austin, it's probably 11 years total, but a little bit of a break.
Oh, okay. So when you basically returned to Texas, that's like right around the time when you started your YouTube channel?
Yeah, like a year before, I think.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't done enough research, but are you pretty much one of the very few watch YouTubers here in Texas?
There's a handful, like Hector is.
Oh, right. I mean, yeah.
But yeah, I don't know of anyone specific. I'd be surprised if there weren't a few more.
Yeah.
But I don't know about anybody specific.
Yeah.
And I think, Hector and I are probably the only ones in Dallas. I didn't even know about Hector initially until was looking at a watch microbrand that was lent to me, and they said, "Here, mail it to this guy next." And it was like Fort Worth. I'm like, "Who's this guy?"
Yeah.
So I sent him a message initially, like, "Hey, didn't know you're here."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hector actually, Hector's been following Jack Mason for a while.
Yeah, that's Hector of Winding Crowns.
Yep. Hector of Winding Crowns.
Give him a plug.
Yeah. Such a cool guy, and we really hit it off. And I invited him out to our office because he was in Fort Worth, and we're here in Dallas. Comes out, we hit it off, and then he basically sort of blows my mind about the world of just YouTube.
Yeah.
YouTube and watches. Because to be honest with you, prior to that, I mean, I knew that there were some YouTube reviewers, but I didn't realize how big it was.
Yeah, and how big the community's kind of grown.
I mean, it was, and then he had brought, several of his watches with him and things like that. And I was like, oh my God. And I never really searched our own, I never searched Jack Mason on YouTube. And so, of course, naturally after that conversation, I go and search Jack Mason, and sure enough, there's videos about it, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And it's out there, and it's obviously very organic. I had no control over it.
Yeah.
But after hearing about, all the YouTubers and the brands that work with these YouTubers and things like that and have these relationships, it really opened up my mind. And, I honestly credit Hector for introducing us to this whole YouTube world. And, from then on, here we are today, because honestly, because if it wasn't for Hector, we wouldn't be. But and even this first recording of this podcast it's to see if we can try something new, something different on YouTube, other than
here's our stuff.
regular. Yeah, here's our stuff, and to read off the specs. And, and so.
Yeah, because I knew about you guys a little bit beforehand. I think I might have told you the story the last time we talked.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, because I'm here in Dallas, I'm always interested in Texas-based brands. And I heard about you guys, and I was thinking hey, I should give you guys a contact, see if I can come down, just maybe tour the facility, maybe video the facility or something. And then, the pandemic hit.
Yeah.
That was a month before the pandemic. I remember thinking about that and looking you guys up, and after that, priorities changed.
Yeah,
and just nobody's going anywhere.
Yeah,
shut down.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. No, it's kind of it's kind of crazy, because timing's everything. It's almost better off that we found each other, or Hector introduced us to each other when we did, because. With our Strato timer that we launched, that was obviously very much an enthusiast-based watch. And honestly, I hate to use the word enthusiast-based, because it's I get it. I get it. It is. It is.
I go back and forth between watch enthusiast, watch geek, watch nerd.
Watch nerd. There's watch snob.
Yeah, there's definitely some snobs out there. And there's snobs on both sides of the price spectrum, too. I've seen that.
Right.
Because you have the guy that's not a real watch. It needs to be made by magical Swiss elves. And then you have the same guy I can get something on AliExpress for $50.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a hot topic too when it comes to the AliExpress. listen, I get it. I mean, like, everything, costs a certain amount of money. Some people are comfortable spending hundreds, thousands, on watches. Some don't. I get that, but it's the thing that bothers me is when you put shame on other people for the choices that they make.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm sure, you're in the thick of it. I'm sure you get all kinds of comments.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I try to look at everything. I don't try to discriminate at times, but so it's like I get flack from all sides sometimes.
Yeah. What would you say is like there has to be some comments that just has stuck with you. Is there anything
there's
like
crazy people out there? I do get occasionally crazy comments.
You do.
And occasionally I have to ban people.
Oh man.
But yeah, I mean, there's the regular, luckily most of my people who watch my channel are pretty civil. Because I've noticed, like, I watch other channels and they get a lot more vicious. I don't get a lot of that. And a lot of times, like, somebody says something I don't disagree with, I try to engage with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do get in crazy people at times.
Well, that's important. I mean, I think that's why you've probably seen the success that you have is just because you have a YouTube channel doesn't mean it's like, here's my channel, here are my videos. Yeah. Have at it. You like foster the environment.
Yeah. So I remember one time, I don't know if the guy even watches me anymore. There's I don't know if the whole Jeannot controversy. I don't know if you know about all that thing.
No, I don't know this.
Okay, so Jeannot's another brand out there. And this isn't a like secret or anything. The original watch that they got famous for is called the Ocean Rover, and it's kind of like the greatest hits of the Submariner.
Oh, okay.
So it's like an homage watch, but then there was this random guy. Well, like Rolex fans hated it because they were saying that it has quality that's kind of coming close to Rolex for like $1,000. And they didn't like it because it was kind of an homage, even though there wasn't a specific reference that it looked exactly like. Just this random guy. This is like one of the craziest things that ever happened in the watch world. What did he call himself? It was just this anonymous, like, investigative report this guy put out about the company.
Okay.
That basically tied how the company founded, possibly like the guy that owned it, maybe because there's some question marks there. Sorry. To a famous replica maker. Forger kind of a thing. Okay. And it just sort of blew up. And I was one of the last people to look at one of these watches before this kind of blew up. Luckily, I didn't get too much flack compared to some other channels. But a lot of the luxury faithful had pitchforks, and they were mad and angry at everybody because you're supporting potentially a forger, which is true. Right. But there's still a lot of like questions of nobody really knew because the company just they buttoned up. They didn't say anything. But I remember this one guy, because I was getting a lot of angry comments, even though my video didn't do that well. Which maybe that was one time I was glad maybe my video didn't do that well. But the one guy I actually started engaging with, and I started just like, hey, it's like the reason I'm not coming out to persecute this company or go after them is because I don't know, and there's still questions. And if this was like a court of law, a lot of this is just hearsay,
right?
Versus there were some other channels that like deleted their videos, like some of the bigger channels out there that looked at these and just like, I don't even want to deal with this. The video's gone.
Yeah.
But I just had this really good conversation with this guy, just like logical, and at the end we kind of agreed to disagree.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, I really appreciate you just talking to me and not going crazy or anything like that, not trying to pick a fight.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to subscribe to you.
Yeah.
Even though he was a luxury guy, so I doubt he ever watched me again.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh. And that's kind of what you have to do sometimes with just people.
Yeah.
There's too many times people just, especially online, like immediately go from 0 to 100. Like, this is a fight. They're disagreeing with me. It's like, no, sometimes it's just, it's a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I feel that because last year, April specifically, we actually raised our retail prices significantly. And I mean, it was, this was a point in time in full transparency when we had been around for almost 8 years now. And during that time we went through all sorts of price changes, really just trying to figure out where the sweet spot was.
Yeah.
And finding that right balance of like, what's the right price for the customer, but also the right price to keep this company going.
Yeah.
And we always erred on the right price for the customer.
Yeah.
And, being, small business, still, startup and things like that.
You lean and mean.
Yeah. You try to go lean and mean. And, but the thing is, like, we were basically selling our watches for just way too cheap. And we had to face a decision like, all right, if we keep going down this path, we're not going to exist anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, that's how it is. And so we had to sort of like rip the Band-Aid off, and we raised our prices significantly. And we knew with that comes like you're kind of abandoning a certain type of audience.
Yeah.
And that was really tough. Honestly, that was a really, really tough move to make. A lot of sleepless nights, so to speak, and but there were a lot of angry people who reached out. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, to your point, if you just have conversations with these people, like I personally reached out to several who were really vocal about our price change. Reached out and I had the conversation with them, like, hey, look, we appreciate you being with us for as long as you have, but we had to make this change, because if not, then you would no longer have any of our watches going forward, essentially. And these are the reasons why and all that. And immediately their tone changes, right? Yeah. And it's just like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm still such a big supporter of you guys. And it's just like, well, that's really great to hear.
Yeah.
And so it just comes down to communication. But yeah, the initial reaction for most people is always just anger, and like,
like for whatever reason, that's just the default in the world today. And it's like, take it down a notch, man. But I've heard that conversation too with other brand owners too about like, at least on public forums, like Chris Vale, who runs NTH, I think has talked multiple times about like how some microbrands are just pricing things way too low. It's undervaluing everything, and it's kind of like a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Because you can't support the company as well as maintain warranties or anything else.
Yeah. That's I'm glad you bring that up, because this is something that I have actually been, talking about for a long time.
Yeah.
And definitely more frequently in the last year, when I really sort of started looking into the whole microbrand space.
Yeah.
And people are pumping out like really, really good watches for really, really, really cheap. And it's just like, how do you do that? Well, you do that because there might be like one guy or, girl or team or whatever working on this. And, it's the whole business model is we'll make a run.
It's a hobby.
Try to sell out, do another one. But there's no like, long-term vision, right? It's not, you're not trying to scale a brand. And so, and you have every right to do that if it's a hobby, like, do it. But then I think the problem is these micro, you're undercutting each other.
Yeah.
And when you undercut each other, as you just said, it's a race to the bottom. And it's like, we can help each other.
Yeah.
Like, why not help each other as opposed to try to cut each other down?
Yeah.
And now you got to think of something new. Like, for example, our Stratotimer, we were fortunate enough to be one of the first to have that 9075 movement. Ours is priced at right at $1,000. I know it's only a matter of time, and it's already starting to happen where brands are coming out with the watch, hundreds of dollars cheaper, and it's I can't compete with that. Like, I just can't do that.
Yeah,
just
you get what you pay for ultimately.
Yeah.
Stuff.
Yeah, and so. That's an interesting like topic, and like especially in a microbrand space that's growing so quickly.
Yeah. And that's one thing I'm concerned with too, and have at least grown over the years. And I've talked with a few other reviewers about this too. Is like if we should almost with some Kickstarters like have an application to see like how business savvy they are, because sometimes it's like they're the price they put or whatever, like their goal on Kickstarter is so low at times. It's like. Are you trying? Is this just a hobby, or like are you planning for the future? Are you planning for returns, shipping, paying for the cost of repairs. Like, are you thinking long term, or is this just covering the cost of the watches? And I think sometimes you got to be cautious about that.
Yeah, and I think that's the transparent, and that's something that we're working on and going to continue to work on, is showing the transparency. This is how you actually run a watch brand and company that's supposed to stick around, and there's future growth.
Yeah.
I mean, there are so many things that people, just the customer side, they just don't understand. Like, for example, as you said, like the returns, the repairs. For repairs, how do you think we repair that? Well, you got to pay for extra parts, additional parts. Where is the repair center? You know, do you do it in house? Most likely not. You probably have to third party it. You got to ship that out there. All that stuff comes into play, and and those are things that I didn't know in the beginning until we had to face it, and we're just like, you know, next thing you know, we're like, oh shoot, we have to raise our prices because there's no other way to do this. You know, it's not as simple as here's your the cost of goods and the margin. It's not that simple.
Yeah, that's AliExpress. It's like, here's your watch. Good luck.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear from you again.
Yeah, exactly. No, okay. So you've handled a lot of watches, know a lot of brand owners, things like that. What do you feel like of all the watches out there? Like, what do you want to see more of? Do you think there's like, something that brands are doing too much of? Dive watches.
And I mean, that's kind of a weird topic in itself, because like I've talked about, some people love this analogy, some people didn't like this analogy, that like dive watches are like the SUV of watches. It's kind of their, you don't need the capabilities, but still it's popular for a reason, because it gives you like an all around just great watch, durable watch, stylish watch.
I like that analogy.
There's a reason it's popular. But at the same time, it's like, there's a lot of them out there.
That's a great analogy. I like that analogy because I do like cars too. Yeah. So it's like for example, like no one needs an AMG version of the Mercedes. You don't need 800 horsepower to speed up an on-ramp on an on-ramp. But it's cool to have.
Yeah, that's what I got. So Zelos Abyss. It was like a 3,000 meter diver that they sent me once.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, this is like a Ford Raptor. It's like very few people are using this to like when you're in daily commute, but it's like, it's still cool.
Yeah, you get a little splashing from when you wash your hands.
You took a shower with it, but it's still, it doesn't mean you shouldn't want it or think it's cool, but it's like, you don't really need it.
Which I have never done it in my life. Yeah. I've never showered with a watch on. So I've had customers who
swear by it, or like, I need this to.
Or they'll say, hey, my
I need a 200 meter ISO rated
my leather band is ruined because I showered with it. I'm like, anyways.
Yeah, it's like
so yeah, I mean, so obviously there are a lot of dive watches, but
and a lot of it's Submariner homages, so to speak, or a lot of interpretations. I think that's maybe one of the problems with divers, or at least a lot of the divers coming out, is that, and there's a reason for that. I mean, the Submariner is iconic, and a lot of people take inspiration from that, either consciously or subconsciously, I think, when they're designing it.
Yeah.
I think you could say like a lot of dive watches have evolved from it, if talking like scientifically, so to speak.
Yeah.
Or maybe they evolved from like Omega or something like that. So if you're doing a dive watch, you almost need to do something really different.
Yeah.
Although at the same time, I've also seen some of the more successful Kickstarters out there are the ones that are playing it a little more closer. So it's like, maybe, I don't know, the market still wants it.
We're talking about this as we're about to launch a new dive watch. Actually, it's just really funny. We just started filming our second season of our YouTube series that we did for the Strata Timer. We're going to do the same thing for the dive watch. But the kind of theme of that is, and I go on to kind of talk about it. It's a dive watch, and I just flat out say, we're not doing anything different. Yeah. But that's not the point. We're not trying to do anything different. Yeah. It's like an SUV. Yeah. Like every car brand, if you're a car brand, you need to have an SUV.
Yeah, I need one.
If you're an apparel brand, you need to have denim. Yeah. It's just kind of like one of those things. You set the foundation. Yeah. And then you go from there. No, I hear you. I mean, it's Submariner. I mean, there's a reason why it's so popular. I mean, it's
the 3 series of watches.
Yeah, it's just so perfect. Like for what it was or what it is.
Yeah.
Because it was that first icon, really sort of like that dive watch, which I'm sure watch enthusiasts will say, no, that was not the first dive watch.
Oh, yeah.
There's like, and but it certainly made the biggest mark in history.
And it's amazing too. Like just like I said, people are giving comments about how knowledgeable some people are. I mean, I learn more from I think I learn more from the people commenting sometimes than I'm teaching other people. It's like some of the obscure knowledge out there. It's like, wow, how did you know that?
Yeah, especially all the reference numbers by memory.
I never was able to do that.
It's crazy. Yeah. No, so I mean, in terms of what's like missing, I mean, I feel like, and this is kind of like a short preview into what we're actually working on, is that plenty of dive watches out there, plenty of sport watches out there.
Yeah.
There aren't enough in the enthusiast space, I think, like chronographs, mechanical ones. Because, I mean, it is expensive, but the other one are dress watches. And funny enough, for some reason, I don't know if it's just me and the channels that I watch or just the blogs that I follow or whatever, but I'm seeing a lot more Cartier recently, just in conversation.
Yeah.
Especially, I know that they came out with like a larger tank.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I didn't look too far into it, but just the category of dress watches in general, I feel like in Microbrands, you don't see a lot of. And I was just kind of wondering, I'm like, I wonder why.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, there's only a handful that I think I've seen in the past.
Yeah.
And I can't think of any brand that really focuses on it, but I do know some brands that have come out with some here and there. And they've done usually pretty well with them.
Yeah, I took a poll recently on a watch blog, and even in our own Facebook group, because I mean, I'll spill the beans here. We are working on a new dive watch or dress watch, not dive
both.
watch. Jeez, yeah, both. But it's supposed to be slim.
Okay,
and I was asking whether or not people prefer an automatic watch, like a self-winding watch, versus a manual wind.
Yeah.
What do you think? Or what do you prefer?
It's very preferential. I'm kind of more automatic. But I know a lot of people have commented how much they love mechanicals. That there's almost like a Zen experience when they wind it every morning kind of thing. But I'm more lazy, so it's like I'd rather just keep it going.
Okay.
I have to remember.
Time.
That's it. I don't discriminate against mechanicals, but it's just my preference is more automatic.
It's just funny because these are the things for the maker of the watch.
Yeah.
You have
to
thinking about all that stuff. It's like, okay, I get it. Automatic, it's easy.
Yeah.
But then it's also really nice to have that. Like, I get it. I get the people who have that connection to the watch.
Yeah.
You know, and things like, well, if it's a dress watch, you're most likely not wearing it every single day.
Yeah.
So is it that big of a hassle to just wind it when you need to wear it? Because it will have died anyway, unless you put it in a winder. Yeah. So it's just one of those things where... and
I've had that conversation too about quartz dress watches. It's like, some people are like, it's always been an argument I've heard of like, it's your dress watch. It's when you're supposed to be dressed up, you're showing your best. But at the same time, it's like, well, I do that like once a month, if that. It's like, do I really want that nice a watch?
Yeah. It's certainly something that I'd like to see more of in Microbrands.
I think it's more the style and the design when it comes to dress watches. Come out with something interesting. And that's sometimes hard to do when you're trying to do like a nice clean design.
Yeah. Oh, I think, of course, I can only make assumptions here, but when you come out with a Microbrand came out with a nice dress watch, I think a lot of things change in terms of like the specs. You're not going to have the rotating bezel. You're not going to need high water resistance. You're not going to need
great lume,
an on the fly micro adjustment. It's a leather watch. Right? So I wonder if it's like one of those things where like, what is there to talk about then if it doesn't have all those specs?
I will say dress watches depends on the watch. Reviews are usually shorter.
Yeah.
Like I don't have to go into the loom. I'm not talking about the bracelet as much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and it depends on how the design of it, like is it simple and clean or is it not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I guess from a review standpoint, it's like, does it look good?
Yeah.
Does it fit well?
Yeah, does it fit well? How does usability sometimes that comes into it? Which a dress watch, that's not always the priority.
Yeah.
It kind of goes in that form versus function argument.
Yeah.
I mean, although I usually like more complicated dress watches. Like I don't usually like just the simple, clean look. I like things that are a little more interesting to look at. Like what was I gonna say?
Example.
Yeah. So like Seiko, the cocktail time.
Oh yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like. I've had two different cocktail times. I've had like the Blue Moon, which is like the bigger, more looks like a kaleidoscope looking at it, and I sold that. Maybe a little bigger than I wanted, but it other than the kind of dial effect, it was relatively clean. But then I got the Mojito, which is a little smaller, different, like more textured galoche kind of effect to it, but then it also has Arabics on it. So to me, it's like I like that more. Or one of my favorites, I call it a dress watch. Other people have called it sports watch. Is an Orient Star.
Oh yeah,
watch I have that's black. I can't remember the reference number. I just call it the Cheshire because, like all Orients, it's got a power reserve meter.
Oh yeah,
and it has a Roman numeral 12 at the top. And somebody pointed out in my video, it's like that almost looks like the Cheshire cat grinning. Like the Roman numerals are the eyes, and you have this curve on it. And after I saw that, I'm like, that's the Cheshire watch.
Yeah.
But it's a little more complicated. It's not just simple, clean, two hands, nothing on it. But that's more my choice. Kind of thing.
Yeah. No, interesting. Yeah. I mean,
but other people I have heard like, no, it's like that's too much going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Dress watches are. It's an interesting category because you can argue that a Submariner is a dress watch.
Yeah.
Because of James Bond.
Yeah.
That whole look. But it's I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah. Another great one to look at, or Vario. I don't know if you've talked to anyone at Vario.
I haven't.
Ivan's a cool guy.
Okay.
He's done a few dress watches here and there, but like their Empire series watches, that's one of my favorites. Because it has this cool, it's like an Art Deco inspired watch.
Oh, interesting.
Little maybe thick for a dress watch. I can't remember how thick it is, but it's just it looks. I like that. Just something engaging, something really interesting to look at for me.
Yeah, I'm excited to work on this because early on in my career, I had worked on.
I guess technically this is a dress watch.
That's a dress watch, the Olympus. Yeah,
yeah, where it's got this like quadrant dial and
kind
of thing going on.
Yeah. No, early on in my career, I had worked on the Movado brand. I also worked on the Hugo Boss brand.
Okay.
And
Movado's that's a perfect example of just clean.
The Hugo Boss was as Hugo Boss is, like the Hugo Boss suit, and most of their watches was very, very dressy, and so and then I spent some time working on Michelle watches, which was at Fossil, which is like that women's kind of entry luxury watches because it has a lot of diamonds all over it. I took that job because, I was so set on being a watch designer. I loved it. I still do. I figured, I really want to know watches. So that's why I was like, what's it like to design women's watches? And so took that job, and that opened my eyes to all kinds of, it's a totally different demographic. Yeah. Obviously. But theirs is a little more dressy too. It's a little on the sporty side, but dressy as well.
I think ultimately it just comes down to be true to your own style. Like I've told people in the past, it's never buy a watch to impress somebody else.
Yeah.
Especially these days. It's most people don't notice your watch, or they think you're weird for not wearing an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Or even if they do see it, like, oh, that's kind of neat. Yeah. They don't even know anything about it. Or
it's interesting because we brought up a Submariner a few times, but the amount of people that buy a Submariner to impress other people.
Yeah.
Except nobody's impressed by a Submariner anymore.
Yeah.
It's just like,
like I said, it's the 3 series of watches.
Yeah.
It's one of the best for a reason, but at this point, it's also boring to talk about.
yeah. Yeah. It's been talked about.
And not much has changed.
Many, many times. Well, how many watches do you have in your collection?
That's a good. I don't even know.
Oh, man. Okay.
That's a whole other topic.
30, 40?
More than that. Well, how many do I have? That's one of my problems right now as a reviewer.
Right.
I would say maybe what's my like real core collection is probably 30 to 40.
Core that you regularly rotate through?
Well, maybe not regularly rotate, but a part of, because I have, the way I look at it is I have like my core watches that are like my watches, and I have a bunch of watches that I keep around for like the channel. And those are kind of the watches that if I stop doing it, I'd probably sell. So that's actually something I need to go through and kind of clean up. In fact, a lot of people have been asking me for a state of sort of a plug, but I don't think I'll hear this by the time I put it out. A lot of people have been asking me to do like a state of the collection I haven't done one for 2 years. And part of it's just because it's a mess. Because a lot of times as a reviewer, it's like I get sent stuff and they're like, hey, just keep it. And then other times it's like I buy stuff to review. Sometimes I get around to it. Sometimes I haven't got around to it. So it just kind of accumulates. And sometimes I'll sell some stuff or sometimes I'll give some stuff away. But a lot of times when I have free time, it's like I'm focusing on another video. So actually on Friday, tomorrow, I decided like, you know what, I'm just going to sort through my collection and really do it, but I'm going to do it as a live stream.
Very nice. I like that.
Like, because part of it too is like I like my videos a little more streamlined and edited if I can. And it's like, this is so much of a mess. It's like, how do you cut this down into being entertaining? So I'm like, just give up, just do a live stream, which is supposed to be long. And
I like that.
Unedited.
I like that.
And I'm going to get a couple of the other reviewers like Dave from Just the Watch.
Oh, cool.
He's going to be in the live stream with me. And
nice.
We might not even get to the watches. It might just turn into like a random chat about stuff. We'll see.
Kind of like what this is.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I mean, that. I do want to kind of cut it down, and I should cut it down to probably like 2 dozen or something. Because it gets to a point where you can't wear them.
No.
There are some sentimental watches I have that I don't necessarily wear.
Right.
So it's kind of like, what do you do with those?
Yeah. How many watches do you travel with typically?
I try to keep it relatively lean. Because I know some people are like, I talk to have like 2 watch rolls. I haven't taken the last couple trips, but one of my go-to travel watches is a Hamilton Khaki King.
Oh, nice.
It's the champagne version. So it's kind of one of those watches that looks really good casual, but because of the dial, it looks decent dressed up. It's not a full dress watch, but for a casual vacation or
vacation
something.
Dinner.
Yeah. Perfect. And then maybe a dive watch for just something a little more. And then these days I've also, some people don't like it, maybe taking a Garmin Instinct running watch with me. But it's kind of become one of my go-to like beater watches, if you call it that. Like, you know, if I know I might get something scratched up, I'm gonna wear that. Because it's just a good watch in general.
No, that's cool. Let's talk about Texas a little bit here. What you mentioned barbecue earlier. What's your favorite barbecue joint here in Texas?
The best I've probably been to is Terry Black's.
Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah, here. But regularly, because I don't come down this to Deep Ellum too much. It's Heart 8 barbecue.
I've been there up in
There's a couple of them. I think the Colony is the one I usually kind of go to.
Yeah, I've been to that one. Yeah.
Kind of maybe once a month go to play Top Golf with my father-in-law, and then we'll get a Heart 8 barbecue.
Very nice.
Although Portillo's is now open up there, so
okay, I have not been, so I'm from Chicago.
Yeah.
And when I heard news that Portillo's was coming down here, I'm just like, I'm sure.
Ate there last week. Got in.
You got in?
If you go like 11 o'clock, it was 11 o'clock on a weekday. Wasn't horrible.
Okay.
Left around noon. Yeah, it was starting to get crazy again. But
did you have the Italian beef sandwich? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about getting the chocolate cake, but
didn't get that. God.
Just had the sandwich and fries.
Good. The Italian beef is just, the trick is you got to get it. You get it wet. Yeah. Oh man, you know how to do it.
Yeah.
You know how to do it right.
There was a Portillo's in Rockford, was where my wife's from.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
I'd been there multiple times before, and saw they were
so
opening
here.
Yeah, that's why my father-in-law's from up there. So I was like, let's take you up there. You haven't had it in a while.
Yeah. A good alternative is actually not far from here. There's a little local family-owned Italian store called Jimmy's.
Yeah.
Have you heard of it? So Jimmy's food store has probably been here it's crazy. I live like 1 block away from there.
Okay.
It's very dangerous because I go there all the time. But they've probably been there, I don't know, 25, 30 years or something like that. Small little Italian market. They only have Italian goods for the most part. Like they have an Italian beef sandwich there.
Okay.
Really good. The team here has gone there for lunch a few times, but the giardiniera peppers on there, the spicy, oh my God, it's so good. But that store is dangerous. Every time you walk into that store, it smells like lasagna. It's like amazing. Okay. So,
well, another food restaurant, just might as well mention it for anyone listening. If you happen to live in Dallas and you may be from Southern California originally, and you miss like Southern San Diego specifically type taco shops, I found one. I don't know if you
like a California taco shop?
Yeah, California style taco shop called Valerie's on 75, just north of George Bush. In fact, they're originally from Oceanside.
Really?
So, I mean, I grew up there. Haven't been back in a while, but it's like still miss like the Southern California style carne asada or a San Diego burrito, which is like carne asada and French fries and like guacamole. And they have all that.
I need to write this down.
Yeah.
Valerie's?
Yeah. Give them a plug. They're good. And it's a typical like taco shop. So it's not like a fancy restaurant at all. It's just like you go in there and it's like, oh, this used to be a Long John Silver kind of thing.
Hey man, I used to love not Long John Silvers.
Yeah.
Let's kind of go back to your channel. I mean, you've kind of grown. Mm-hmm. I mean, you probably grow consistently.
Yeah.
What's sort of the end goal isn't the right word, but like, do you see
where
something?
I want to be?
Yeah. Like, does it do you see it going somewhere in terms of like, is it just, hey, just keep doing what I'm doing? And
yeah, I mean, that's the thing with YouTube. I mean, everybody has goals, I think, and ambitions of like at least getting to 100,000 subscribers because we're such a small niche.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But it's hard sometimes. Sometimes I don't want to say it's completely random because it's not. There are different, there are strategies you can do to help and maximize your growth.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's hard to figure out what those are because the almighty algorithm is constantly changing on YouTube.
Oh.
And what worked maybe a couple of years ago may not be working now. Mm-hmm. And the thing is like just experiment, try stuff because you never know what's going to work, what's not going to work. So I've had videos that I didn't think I just did on a whim do pretty well. Like one, I think got to 70,000 views. It was just this idea I had when I was like, this was a couple of years ago, driving down from Illinois. This is back for the new Seiko 5 line when most Seiko 5s were like the 7S movement.
Yeah.
That didn't have hand winding.
Yeah.
They're like, I heard a lot of like the Seiko fanboys, you don't need hand winding because the rotor is so efficient kind of a thing, like magic fingers, I think they called it or something like that. So I just thought, hey, why don't I do an experiment? My background's in science. Let's just do kind of a fun experiment. So I had like a bunch of watches and I think it went beyond just the Seikos and just like do the Seiko shake kind of thing where you shake it and then see how long it runs for.
Yeah.
And that video did surprisingly well.
Oh, nice.
Or one of my other, it's constantly successful, doesn't even really have anything to do with watches, is I talk about tritium. Since my background as a scientist, I figured, hey, I actually have knowledge. This is more like the science of tritium, like how it's working, what's going on behind the scenes. And that's constantly getting views from like 4 years later.
That's amazing.
Not a ton, but just like constantly. And a lot of them, most of them, the number one comment on that video is a quote from Spider-Man 2. Because I don't know if you remember that movie at all, but like there's the one with Doc Ock and it still had Tobey Maguire and he was messing around with tritium to make some sort of energy source.
Oh.
So people are always bringing that up in that video. But then like more recently, I thought I had a genius idea for a video series and I put out 2. They call it Watch Riddles.
I saw a couple of those from
those have done horribly. The thing is, the people that have watched them seem to love it. Like the whole idea behind it is I pick like 5 watches.
Yep.
I don't tell you what they are.
Yep.
Usually they're watches with history, so I just kind of give hints, maybe really close up, zoomed in part of the view.
Yeah.
And it's just, fun thing like, hey, how much do you know? Can you guess what
Something
this watch
different.
is?
Yeah.
I thought it was a genius idea. And the people that have watched it, at least from the analytics, seem to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But it's getting people to watch it, or like the algorithm has no idea what to do with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's an idea. I'm still probably gonna do maybe one more of those just to round out like a trilogy or something like that, and we'll see after that. But yeah, that was one of the second one I put out was like the worst performing video I think.
Oh my gosh.
Like a couple of years.
Yeah.
It was like barely broke 1,000. I was like, what's going on here?
Oh my God.
So the thing is, you never know. So you just you can't let the disappointments really discourage you. The failures discourage you. You just kind of keep trucking along and have fun with it, basically.
Yeah. Well, the whole point of this, as I had mentioned before, was to just have more real conversations with people in the industry. Get to know Shane behind the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Before we go, I know I wanted to we talked about this before, but your little your sitting down action.
Oh yeah.
You're sitting. That's so signature of you. And we talk about it all the time. We're like, man, something about Shane. That's
every once in a while I don't do it, but yeah.
The sitting down action and the soothing voice is just, I think that's what, forget about watches. He could be talking about chairs.
Because I just did it, like I was telling you, I just did it once and some people had multiple people comment like, that's really cool. I should do that more often kind of thing. And I was like, all right. Okay.
Thanks for participating, joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Having a chat. Yeah, cool. Okay, thanks for listening to our first episode of Time and Tell. You can find Shane's YouTube channel at Relative Time. He has a lot of great, amazing videos and a really great analysis on all things watches. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. If there's anyone else you'd like to see or any topics you'd like me to cover, please comment below and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, y'all.